The headstone was still being carved when the next one fell. Ali Larijani, the most powerful man left standing in the Islamic Republic after the assassination of Supreme Leader Khamenei on February 28th, was killed overnight in Israeli airstrikes on Tehran. Gone with him, Gholam Reza Soleimani, commander of the Basij, the 700,000-strong internal militia that has served as the Iranian regime's iron fist against its own people for decades. Two of the last load-bearing pillars of the Islamic Republic eliminated in a single night. Israel calls it decapitation. Iran calls it martyrdom. Analysts are calling it something else entirely, a moment that does not reverse. Because here's the thing, Israel and Washington are not merely killing leaders. They are dismantling an architecture, and the architecture does not care who replaces the next name on the list. What we are watching right now is not a war with an exit ramp. It is a machine that has been switched on, and nobody in Washington, Jerusalem, Tehran, or Brussels has figured out where the off switch is. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what just happened in that overnight strike, why Tehran never fully anticipated this level of decapitation, and why the world you are waking up to today looks structurally different from the one you woke up to 3 weeks ago when this war began. Let us rewind the clock, not weeks, but months. It started before February 28th, before Operation Epic Fury, before the nearly 900 U.S. and Israeli strikes that opened this war in the first 12 hours. The blueprint for where we are now was drawn long before the first bomb fell. Iran had spent years building a network of deterrence, ballistic missiles, Shahed drones, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite proxy groups in Iraq, the Houthis positioned in the Red Sea. The logic was layered and deliberate. If you come for us, the entire region burns. That was the architecture. That was the message. Washington and Jerusalem read the architecture, studied it, and decided the answer was not deterrence. It was decapitation. On February 28th, the opening strikes killed Supreme Leader Khamenei on the first day of the war. Iranian officials confirmed it within hours. Ali Larijani, the veteran political operator, former nuclear negotiator, former parliamentary speaker, the man who had navigated every political current inside the Islamic Republic for 30 years, stepped forward to lead Iran's Supreme National Security Council and became, in effect, the de facto wartime commander of the Iranian state. He was pragmatic where the hardliners were not. He was the figure foreign governments believed they could eventually talk to. Former Jordanian ambassador Rud al-Hussein described him as one of the few people the international community could communicate with. He was, in the language of strategic analysis, a pressure valve, and now that pressure valve is gone. Receipt number 1, the decapitation ladder. What happened overnight on March 17th was not a single lucky strike. According to the Israeli military, the airstrike that killed Larijani was carried out by the Israeli Air Force based on precise intelligence. At the same time, a separate strike targeted a field tent being used as an improvised command post for the Basij area because General Gholam Reza Soleimani and his commanders had abandoned their fixed bases, knowing those were already mapped for destruction. The Israelis found him anyway. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz confirmed both kills and then framed the strategy in plain language. The leaders of the regime are being killed and their capabilities terminated. This was not improvisation. This was a list being worked through methodically, Khamenei on day 1, Larijani and the Basij commander on day 18. What it really means, Israel and the United States are betting that if you remove enough decision-makers fast enough, the machine jams. Tehran cannot coordinate. The command structure fractures. The war machine slows. The receipts from the first 3 weeks suggest that bet has not paid off yet. Iran still has ballistic missiles in the air. Drones are still flying over Baghdad's green zone. Receipt number 2. The Strait and the isolation on March 16th. NATO allies formally rejected President Trump's demand that they send warships to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Germany's position was unambiguous. This war has nothing to do with NATO. Britain's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said it is not a NATO mission and will not be. Japan, Australia, France, and Italy followed. Greece refused outright. Trump had warned that a negative response would be very bad for the future of NATO. The allies gave him a negative response anyway. This is the receipt that the operational picture of this war has been hiding behind the battlefield footage. Washington launched Operation Epic Fury without consulting its traditional alliance partners. It did not run this through NATO. It did not build a coalition first. And now, 3 weeks in with the Strait of Hormuz partially disrupted and oil prices surging as Iranian strikes hit Gulf energy infrastructure, Washington is asking those same partners to send ships into a war they were not asked about and did not endorse. The allies declined. And that silence, in the language of alliance politics, was deafening. Receipt number 3. The carrier and the cracks. The USS Gerald R. Ford has now been deployed for approaching 10 months. It is one of the 2 principal American aircraft carriers operating in waters surrounding Iran during this conflict. On approximately March 12th, a fire started in the ship's main laundry area and burned for more than 30 hours, spreading through ventilation systems to multiple sections of the ship, including crew quarters. According to reporting by the New York Times and Washington Post, more than 600 sailors lost their sleeping spaces in the fire and have since been sleeping on floors and tables throughout the vessel. 2 sailors were treated for injuries. The carrier is now temporarily docking for repairs. This is not a catastrophic military failure, but it is a signal. The USS Gerald R. Ford was never designed for a 10-month continuous deployment in an active combat theater. The ship is showing the strain of a war that was planned to be short and is becoming something longer. And Iran's drones are still reaching the Baghdad green zone. 5 drones and rockets struck near the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad on March 17th alone. The second major strike on that compound since the war began, with earlier footage showing Iranian-linked FPV drones flying what appeared to be unimpeded through the green zone. If this story is connecting dots you have not seen assembled anywhere else in one place, you are already ahead of most people watching this unfold. Hit subscribe right now. This war is moving faster than any single outlet can track, and you need to be here when the next piece drops. The contrast at the center of this war is not between Iran and the United States. It is between 2 modes of strategic thinking. Israel has been executing a calculated, intelligence-driven strategy of decapitation. It is cold. It is methodical. It is the kind of approach that does not make speeches first. Khamenei on day 1, senior IRGC figures in the following weeks. Larijani and the Basij commander on day 18. Each elimination is a data point in a blueprint that was drawn before the first strike. The Iranian state, by contrast, has been forced into a reactive posture while still managing to execute its own long-prepared deterrence architecture. Iran has not activated the Houthis in the Red Sea yet. Analysts and regional sources suggest this is a deliberate strategic hold, with some reporting indicating China and Russia are counseling restraint there for now. The moment that changes, the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb becomes a choke point alongside the Strait of Hormuz, and cargo ships already being diverted into the Red Sea could find themselves caught between 2 blocked exits. Iran did not match aggression with aggression alone. It extended its deterrence network through proxies, maintained communication channels the international community cannot fully cut, and continued launching at Gulf infrastructure while simultaneously holding one of its most powerful cards in reserve. While Washington obsesses over the optics of allied participation and Trump announces contradictory statements in successive press conferences, the strategic reality is accumulating on the ground. The UAE has temporarily shut down its airspace. Dubai and Abu Dhabi have been rattled by Iranian pressure. Saudi Arabia is being told to clarify its position. The Gulf states that invested in Trump-era economic arrangements are now discovering what it costs to be adjacent to a war they did not start. You do not win a war in the Middle East by eliminating names. You win it by holding territory, controlling energy flows, and maintaining coalition coherence. On all 3 of those measures, the picture for Washington is more complicated than the official briefings suggest. So, what does this actually mean for you outside the region? If you work in energy, shipping, logistics, or anything connected to global supply chains, the partial disruption of the Strait of Hormuz is already repricing your inputs. Oil markets have been volatile since the war began, with Iranian strikes on Gulf energy production pushing prices upward in bursts. If you live in a NATO country, your government has now taken a formal position. This is not our war. That position was not made lightly. The political cost of refusing a direct American request for warships is real. The fact that Germany, Britain, France, Japan, and Australia all paid that cost in the same week tells you something about how allies are calculating the credibility of American strategic leadership right now. If you are in the Gulf, you already know this. The UAE shut its airspace. Bahrain reported attacks on fuel tanks. Kuwait saw a hostile drone strike a residential building. These are not abstract geopolitical data points. These are the real-world consequences of a war that was launched without regional consensus and is now burning through the architecture everyone in the neighborhood built their economies around. Once a company reroutes its supply chain away from a disrupted corridor, it does not automatically reroute back when the guns go quiet. The new infrastructure gets built, the new partnerships get locked in, and those structures become the permanent landscape. 3 scenarios for where this goes next. Scenario 1. Managed de-escalation business communities. Gulf sovereigns and back-channel diplomatic actors force a cooling mechanism. Both sides declare enough of a win to pull back from the most destructive exchange tempo. A face-saving framework emerges, possibly through an intermediary like Oman or Qatar. The structural damage to the U.S.-NATO alliance relationship and to Iranian leadership remains, but the kinetic phase slows. The new partnerships that formed during the war do not dissolve. They become the baseline. Scenario 2, regional realignment cascade. The Gulf states, having absorbed Iranian strikes and American pressure simultaneously, begin recalibrating their security architectures away from exclusive dependence on Washington. Other middle powers in Asia, Europe, and the global South accelerate parallel frameworks for energy security and trade routing. The United States remains the largest military power on Earth, but its role as the unquestioned central node of the regional order quietly contracts. The vacuum does not stay empty. Scenario 3. The spiral no one wants to name out loud. Iran activates the Houthis in the Red Sea. Bab al-Mandeb closes. Cargo ships caught between 2 choke points trigger a global shipping crisis. Iran's proxy network in Iraq escalates. The Baghdad Green Zone becomes untenable for American diplomatic presence. Israel moves into southern Lebanon with full ground forces, 450,000 reservists already called up. The war expands from a U.S.-Israeli-Iran bilateral into a regional conflagration with no obvious ceiling. This is the scenario where the generals and admirals reportedly slipping exit strategy options into Trump's daily war briefings are not being alarmist. They are being professional. The relationship between Washington and the architecture of Middle Eastern order it built over 50 years will not return to the pre-February 28th baseline. Even if every gun goes quiet tomorrow, the lesson has already been absorbed. You never put all your strategic eggs in one basket. Once alternatives are built, once new supply routes are mapped and new partnerships are inked, they do not vanish when the crisis passes. They become the new normal. Ali Larijani was the man Iran's remaining leadership believed could eventually negotiate an off-ramp. He was pragmatic in a system that does not reward pragmatism easily. Analysts argue that his death may harden what is left of Iran's decision-making core rather than weaken it, because the moderate voice in the room has been removed. Israel did not start this war because it calculated the outcome with certainty. It started this war because it decided the risk of waiting was greater than the risk of acting. Whether that calculation holds is the question that will define the next 6 months. Did Washington dismantle Iran, or did it dismantle the conditions under which Iran might have eventually chosen a different path? Is the decapitation strategy making the Islamic Republic weaker, or simply more desperate and less predictable? And if the allies are already stepping back now in week 3, what does week 10 look like? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Final analysis. Subscribe now, because the next chapters of this story, whether Iran activates the Houthis, whether the USS Gerald R. Ford returns to operational status, whether a Gulf diplomatic back channel produces a ceasefire framework, or whether Israel opens a full ground offensive in Lebanon, are coming fast. This story is not slowing down. Do not look away. This content is commentary and analysis for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, legal, or geopolitical advice.